Hi and welcome to this episode of Food for Thought. I'm Deborah Walker and this week I'm with Brendan Rydins, who has a degree in Human Nutrition and Dietetics and further qualifications in Corrective Exercise. He's also a world powerlifting champion, which he actually achieved whilst he was doing his degree. So that should give you some indication of what he's like. He helps fund the organisation named PLAT, a school in Haiti, which invented posture PT back support and recently partnered with the Make in India initiative to develop and implement advanced wound care to underprivileged populations. A fascinating portfolio of projects, I have to say, he's got on the go. And that's firstly, I think, what we'll talk about. But the main part of the interview today is we're going to talk about the musculoskeletal issue, which has 1 in 5 suffering in the United States, which is arthritis. So, hello, Brendan. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, and I'm very excited to be on the Food for Thought show and be able to share some of my experiences with observations and treatment of people dealing and suffering with chronic pain.
Yes, it is a really fascinating area. But before we get into that, I am absolutely fascinated about your platter of projects that you've got on the go. And I'll be honest. Talk to me a little bit about posture PT back support before we actually talk about the Made in India, because that has got me interested as well. Just highlight what you're doing for the audience.
Absolutely. Now let me preface this by saying that ADD is not always a bad thing. It allows you to go on multiple projects at the same time. But Posture PT is a back product that I developed not for the purpose of commercialization and selling, but it was out of a constant observable need that I was seeing. As a corrective exercise specialist, my job is to analyze your static posture, non-moving posture, and also observe your moving posture or dynamic posture, how your body is lining up while doing movements versus standing, and look for distortions or obvious movement pattern problems that are also indicative of certain muscles being tight, certain muscles being weak, which also correlate with extreme strength to different, joint issues or chronic pain issues. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I saw over and over, and with a definite or certain confidence, I can say in my experience, if I were to observe 100 people that came in to work with me, at least 95 would have some degree of rounded shoulders and forward head. That slumped over, slouched look gives you a little bit of a hunchback. Mm-hmm. So now, while this might not seem like that big of a deal, it is actually the genesis of so many different issues with chronic pain. It affects the way we breathe. It affects even hormone levels like testosterone and cortisol to be in these bad positions. So seeing this over and over, my job was to correct this. So we'd spend an hour mobilizing and stretching tight tissues, strengthening and awakening the kind of dormant or underactive tissues and bringing that balance back to the body while creating this awareness. But they would come back to me the next day. They'd be back in those terrible postures, and I'd look at them and say, what the heck did you do between yesterday and today? Why are you right back to where we started? I thought we accomplished so much yesterday. And they said, Brendan, I know, but it's hard. I sit in my car for an hour commuting to work and an hour home, and when I sit at my desk, I tend to slouch over my keyboard and things like that, and then I also ask, I said, well, what do you do when you get home? Oh, well, it was a rough day, so I sit on the couch, and I'm like, show me your sitting position on the couch. And more times than not, it's definitely not with great posture. You're in this, once again, slouched over position. Well, here's the problem. The body is too smart for our own good. It's an adaptive mechanism. And when you put your body in these positions continuously, the body goes, hey, you know what? I'm going to help you out. If you want to sit in this way all day, I'm going to move everything and keep it there. It's called adaptive shortening. So these tissues shorten up. And now you start to change the way that the joints are lined up and the way the joints function, the way the cervical spine or the neck functions and the lumbar spine. And this just poor posture can set you up for a whole host of problems. It can lead to the lengthening and weakening of the rotator cuff and an eventual injury of it. It can cause tendinitis in the front of the shoulder on the bicipital tendon. It can cause chronic tension and tightness in the muscles right on the top of the shoulders, those upper traps, and can lead to pulling the head forward, chronic headaches, cervical disc problems. And for every inch forward the head is of the middle line of the human body, you're applying approximately 10 pounds of pressure to that spine. So a whole host of things come out of this, and not to mention the detrimental effects on increasing your body's stress hormone cortisol and reducing testosterone, which was measured by psychologist Amy Cuddy. She has a TED Talk about how power posing or standing confidently can rearrange your actual hormones. And you also deactivate your that diaphragm breathing, or that breathing from the belly. So anyway, to get to the point of posture PT, seeing this condition over and over, I saw that people needed to sit differently. It wasn't just come in and correct the body while they're with me for that 1 hour. What else were they doing all day in those 8 hours at work? So it came to me while I was driving to a weightlifting competition. I kept trying to pull my shoulder blades back and sit up really straight. And about 2 or 3 minutes into it, I would slouch right back over. It's difficult to hold these things. You need a constant reminder. And I honestly think some of the technologies out there that kind of beep at you when you lose good posture, there's these devices available. There are apps for phones and whatnot. I found it to be kind of annoying. And it also didn't help the fact I was like, I know I'm in bad posture. I'm just tired of holding it, okay? Phone. So I looked at my seat, and if you look at a car seat, it's a bucket seat, or otherwise known as concave in shape. So I thought to myself, what if the seat was convex? What if my shoulders could kind of wrap around it the opposite way so they would get pulled back, and then my head would return to a neutral position? So being slightly clever at this moment, I took at my hotel, I took a knife and I cut my foam roller that I use on my legs to prepare for competition. I cut it in half lengthwise, and I stuck it vertically behind my back. And all of a sudden, this tube behind my back that was cut in half was the perfect supplement to sitting properly. It forced me to sit with my shoulder blades back, head in a neutral position, and I was sitting nice and upright. So this inspired the design of Posture PT. And luckily for me, I had a wonderful business partner who had already launched his first consumer product. We were actually friends in college and just good buddies down there. And he was very successful with his product called KeySmart. And I brought this idea to him. He also saw kind of the need for it, and we ended up launching it. It did extremely well on Kickstarter, a crowdfunding platform. And now fast forward, we're at a point where we're fully commercialized. Our website is up, and inventory's here, and we got the whole process underway. So it was a cool opportunity to take a problem that I saw, create a solution that genuinely helped people, and then see an opportunity to kind of reach more people and commercialize it at the same time, turn it into a really neat business. So that's kind of the basics of Posture PT.
It's really clever, because considering how long we actually sit for our days now, in the jobs that we do, most people are inactive.
Oh my goodness! It's so I think the numbers have changed, but the last numbers that I saw were about the average American is at about 9.3 hours of sitting, and children are more than 14 hours.
Wow!
This isn't just about. I'm sure you've heard the saying now that they're starting to propagate, which is sitting is the new smoking.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I was recently reading a book by Dr. Kelly Starrett. I don't know if you're familiar with Kelly Starrett or not. He's the host of Mobility WOD. It's a YouTube channel. Mm. And he's an author. Really brilliant guy. But his book is called Desk Bound. And it talks about the real dangers posed by sitting, not just for bad posture, but all the changes. And in that book, they cite studies that show 1 hour of sitting reduces life expectancy by about 21 minutes as compared to smoking one cigarette, which reduces life expectancy around 11 minutes. So that's why they're calling it sitting is the new smoking. So it's crazy, and all the other things that it brings about. But it kind of leads into this, at the beginning of the show, you spoke a little bit about arthritis and how it afflicts so many people. Now, I want to get into this a little bit because there's a lot of confusion. And honestly, in my experience, I'll be the first to say I'm not a physician. I'm not a qualified doctor, and I just work with people who have malalignment problems, bad posture, bad movement problems. And I have had so many people come to me diagnosed with arthritis. But it was interesting because as soon as we started to mobilize their tight muscles and get their body moving better, that arthritis that was quote-unquote inevitable went away. So in my experience, arthritis has started to become an easy blanket term. And once again, I'm not going to pin all physicians down and say they function this way, because there's some amazing doctors out there. But there are some that throw this at any type of joint pain and say, oh, well, that's arthritis. And I ask the people, I say, look up some basic medical terminology. If you do this, arthro means joint, and itis is inflammation. I'm like, okay, so you have an inflamed joint. What is the cause of that? It's not just that is a description of a problem, but not the source of the problem. That's where my frustration comes in. Mm-hmm. Now, working with these people who have had this diagnosis, they don't understand how important it is to keep this body lined up. Just to give you an example of the I get knee pain all the time. Oh, I have arthritis in my knees. I have arthritis in my knees. I actually get this from my father, who, it's from those years I played football. Like, Dad, that was a long time ago, and it wasn't that much of your life. And the current scientific information cites that the human body can withstand 110 years of fairly athletic use when it's lined up well. And this is citing once again Dr. Kelly Starrett. So I said, I don't think that's the issue. Now, if you look at the alignment of his legs, it looks like he's been riding a horse for the last 10 years straight. His knees are what are called abducted or abducted and externally rotated. They're in horrible position. The joint is completely misaligned. The muscles on the side of his legs, the IT band or iliotibial band, is just horribly overactive and tight, pulling him in these terrible positions, which just creates this very, very bad alignment. And the one thing that I try to share with people is this. When talking, let's say, about a knee surgery potentially, because I've had people come to me before and we've prevented these. But here's what I try to get them to think about. I say, all right, let's say you have a car and it has bad alignment, just like your body, which currently has bad alignment. When you have this terrible alignment, you are wearing down your tires very unevenly or poorly, right? They're not performing their best. They're breaking down more quickly. So that's the same thing that's actually happening in your joints. The poor alignment of the skeletal frame based on some muscles being tight, some being underactive, lacking the balance and dynamic stability, is now created this suboptimal condition for those joints to line up and damage is occurring. Okay. So what happens if you have bad alignment and you replace those tires, but you never change the alignment? Well, it's pretty obvious what the answer is, right? It's the same problem comes right back up just a little bit later. It's a very temporary Band-Aid type replacement. So unless the alignment is addressed, it is, in my opinion and my experience with the patients I've worked with, is that you are not going to solve the actual problem. You're going to put a Band-Aid on the problem if we don't address these issues of muscular alignment and bringing the body back to its proper positions.
I don't think people actually understand what that feels like in their body, though, anymore, because I believe that people are sitting for so long, as you're saying, they're slouched for so long, they're in positions over the years where they think that is the norm, and to actually be realigned feels very, very different in the body, doesn't it?
You hit it right on the head. Now, one thing, the reason I wasn't the biggest fan, and I felt the need that posture PT had to be developed, is because a lot of the different products out there, like I said, the reminder apps that have little diodes that you can connect to your body, and it beeps at you and you're not sitting in good posture, it doesn't necessarily instruct or push the body or help guide the body into proper posture to create that awareness of what proper posture should be. And the whole point is, I can line you up, but if you're not aware of how things should feel, if you're not aware of where things should be positioned, it's not going to be that helpful. So part of the process is first of all getting someone in better posture, but two, making them aware of what it actually feels like, that their shoulder blades should be pulled together, that their shoulders should not be internally rotated or, rounded forward, that their hips shouldn't be higher in the back than they are in the front. If you stand and look sideways in a mirror and your belt is higher up in the back than it is in the front, there's a problem there. And it actually is one of the main causes of low back pain. You have tight hip flexors, or the muscles in the front of your hips, and it's rotating your hips, and it's changing how your lumbar spine is functioning. So, realizing what good posture is great, but understanding and being aware of what it's supposed to feel like is even more important, so that you know that there's a problem. So you're 100% right. When you sit, you're in hamstring flexion, your hips are flexed, your shoulders tend to round. This becomes the new norm. This becomes the position you're used to. So we have to really take the time to not just learn about these things, but practice good movement and learning what these things are supposed to feel like in order to make change and let these joints line up the way they need to be lined up.
And I know that when people come to see me, that they are often, I will watch them come through the clinic, and I'm watching for how they're walking and how they're actually holding their body and things like this, because it gives me a huge amount of information by the time they've arrived, and then how they're sitting in regards to what will be affected within the body. And from my perspective, I can't say I get it right myself, but ultimately in regards to my clients, I'm very aware of their posture and how it is truly impacting on their health, because it's a huge factor that I actually don't believe people truly understand can be affecting everything from their hands going numb and having cold hands and feet to, like you say, in regards to having headaches. But most people will go and see the doctor and then will just be given anti-inflammatories or a series of medications that are just dealing with the pain, rather than actually taking the time to actually look at the individual and seeing that there's a wider issue going on in the way they're holding their body, and other lifestyle issues, because ultimately what we're talking about is their lifestyle is impacting on their body.
It's one of the most frustrating things that I experience is this notion that when you feel pain, the first answer is to kind of numb or block that pain. In fact, I was watching a commercial the other day for a type of topical, I can't remember the brand, but it was saying, did you know that pain is due to aggravated nerves? And I'm looking at this just going, what the heck kind of information is this being given to the general public? This is, what is this? This is a joke. Pain is a signal in the human body to tell you that there's a problem, so that you can dig into and address the problem, not just get rid of it. Inflammation is a telltale marker of a problem. Don't just take something to block it necessarily if you're not addressing what's causing that problem. And what I can tell you is almost every case of shoulder pain, one of my favorites is I worked with a lady, she was 73 years old at the time and had 2 tears in her rotator cuff. And, the doctor said, surgery's going to have to happen. I'm going to send you into physical therapy prior to kind of prep you for this surgery. When I saw her and she told me this story, I said, let me work with you. Just give me 2 weeks. And if I can't convince you to just drop everything else you're doing and work with me only, then so be it. I'm not going to charge you until after I've proven this a little bit. Because the reason that I wanted to work with her so badly is she had forward head, rounded shoulder posture. And I knew from seeing this time and time again that this was the source of her rotator cuff getting, essentially when those shoulders are rounded forward, that rotator cuff is in very bad position. It's lengthened. It can't create stability of the joint. And there's so many other things that go on the shoulder. I mean, in fact, there's 17 muscles that attach to the shoulder and do movement with it. So you have to know how all of those need to be aligned and function with one another in order to really help a shoulder. And if you simply repair something, well, you didn't really solve the problem of how it got damaged in the first place. So we started working together. A lot of time was spent mobilizing those big tissues like the lats, the pectorals, the upper traps, some of the muscles in the neck, to help restore the tissue pliability, and then strengthening those muscles between her shoulder blades. And it took about 9 weeks total, but she was able to not go and get surgery. She dropped her physical therapy, and I'm not even going to get into that because there are wonderful therapists out there, don't get me wrong. It just for this particular practice was giving her stuff to do and then walks away, doesn't observe the human body and making sure she's holding good positions. And, 9 months into it, she went back and was 100% healed and is moving better than ever. In fact, I'm releasing it's similar to an ebook, except for it's going to have demonstrational videos and things like that. It's going to be a step-by-step process for if you have shoulder pain, low back pain, knee pain, whatever you might have, of using these very simple techniques of mobilizing, stretching, activating underactive, dormant muscles, and then reintegrating good movement. It's just 4 steps to solving all of your pain problems. So I'm going to be releasing that here in the very near future as an ebook, but like I said, it'll have instructional video. And Liz, the lady I'm referring to, is going to be my model, because if you're in your 70s and you can perform all the movements, or she's in her 70s and can perform all the movements I'm prescribing, anyone can do it. And anyone can find relief, because I hear all the time, "Oh, Brendan, I'm older. It's just the obvious onset of arthritis, or it's old age. My body's just wearing out." And no, not even close. And here's an example of it right here. So I'm using her as my end of all excuses, so that people actually will make an effort to heal themselves. It's within all of our capacity to feel much better than we currently do.
But we are told continuously that it's an age-related condition apart from anything else, and that it's incredibly common. And as you get older, in fact, the research shows that as you hit your 30s, it gets worse. 40s and 50s is where it exacerbates. So we're told that.
Yeah, you are. And you know what? Without looking into the subject a little bit more deeply, it would seem very plausible and likely that that's the case, because as you do get older, you have more pains, you recover slower, you experience these things. So to the average person, that seems very obvious, right? Mm-hmm. But let me, when you look at it from this perspective, I don't know if you have gone out and indulged on too many alcoholic drinks at one point or another, but when you're younger...
Won't give those secrets away.
When you're younger, and I think everyone can speak to this, you can go out and have one of those kind of nights and bounce back much more quickly, right? As opposed to the older you get, it seems like your hangover lasts far longer, and it's much harder to deal with than when you're younger. So, the reason I'm kind of telling this story is, if you do things like sit at your job all day and you sit in your car and you don't move the body well and you don't have a good understanding, as you do age and lose the ability to recover as quickly, bad habits start to actually wreak havoc. Whereas you can bounce back from that stuff when you're younger. It doesn't mean you were doing anything right when you were younger. It's just that the body's losing its ability to recover from the ultimately, for lack of a better word, dumb stuff that you're doing to it. So without lining it up, without understanding the posture that it should be in, without exercising the body properly, you're inevitably going to run into these problems. So it's not directly age-related. It just becomes more noticeable. Your bad decisions become more noticeable with age because you can't recover as quickly from them. And, that's what Liz is going to demonstrate for everybody when I do release this book, and show everyone that it doesn't have to do with age. You can, at any point, use these techniques to bring your body back into alignment and feel fantastic. And even my own experience, I definitely experienced more pain when I was in my early 20s as compared to right now, because I didn't understand these techniques. And I'm actually athletically better than when I was 23, 24, or even 21 when I won the World Powerlifting Championships. Right now I can run further, I can jump higher, I can perform more flexible. I feel significantly better because I've taken these things into account. So it's not necessarily age-related whatsoever. according to everything that I've experienced and seen in results with people.
Now, it's considered, in fact, it is one of the leading causes of disability in both the US and the UK, isn't it? Arthritis.
So, it's present in so many people, and it's involving itself younger and younger populations. That I want to make sure that everybody knows that we're not speaking about rheumatoid arthritis here.
No.
Totally different, but just that general diagnosis of joint pain. Yes, it's low back pain is one of the highest expenses and causes the most missed work time and all these things. And once again, we look back. There was an interesting study that was cited by the National Academy of Sports Medicine out of Arizona. They selected two populations, one out of Mexico, one out of the United States, to look at lower back pain. And what they found was that the people in the population from Mexico had 90% less instance of low back pain. And they were able to point to the fact that these people walk or bike to work. They do physical labor for work. They don't sit when they get home. If they do sit, they are in actually a proper squatted position when they sit down. Their bodies are constantly being not only used, but they're always in good alignment because they're being used well. They're not being distorted by sitting or rounding the body out, which is the exact opposite in the United States. Our technology has actually stopped us from using our bodies the way they're meant to. So our bodies are trying to tell us this isn't right. It's just that instead of listening, we decide that either we need to cut into it, we need to take a bunch of pills for it. But it ultimately comes down to understanding this alignment. And I mean, at the most basic aspect of it, staying physically active and mobile. And if there's one tiny tidbit that I could share with everybody, the rule of thumb is for every 30 minutes spent sitting, stand up and walk around for 2. Get the lymphatic system working again. Get that circulation going to your legs. Get your body moving. Because when you sit, you essentially shut off all those muscles. The glutes and the muscles in the back of the legs, and they become weaker over time, which makes you more prone to not only injury, but especially with the elderly populations, falls, lack of balance, lack of mobility, all these things.
Well, this is one of the arenas that actually those people who report, and I'll talk about the UK statistics I was reading, 50% of them don't tend to take any drugs, but actually 1 in 4 of them will use a complementary approach. So it seems that people with arthritis will look for alternative routes to actually resolve their pain. So what you're talking about is probably something that some of them will be doing via glucosamine. They'll be doing a bit of yoga, maybe some Pilates, but lots of them won't actually know about the corrective exercise that you're actually talking about, because we would just see it as physio in the UK. So what would be specifically different in regards to what you would do?
So specifically different as compared to a physio, you're saying?
Yes.
I can't fully speak to their practice because I'm not educated in what they do exactly, and I've never worked with one, and it's not a common practice here in the United States, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is, maybe you can compare the process and show how close it is to what a physio does. But essentially, my whole job is when somebody walks in, as I was explaining before, is I look at the way they stand when they're not moving. I look at the way they move. I do have them do squat assessments and other type of movement assessments, and I look for obvious signs that things are out of alignment, whether they're standing there and the shoulders are just rounded forward and the head's forward, the pelvis is rotated anteriorly or tilted forward, the feet are turned out, or let's say they're squatting, and I have them do. I like to do the overhead squat a lot. If I see the feet turn out and the arches collapse, there's a sign that the calf complex is tight. If the knees knock inward, or what is called adduction internal rotation, I can be fairly certain that the muscles in the inner thighs, those adductors, are overactive. The muscles that assist in hip flexion, that rectus femoris muscle running right down the middle of your thigh, might be overactive. And I can also indicate that maybe the side of the butt, that glute medius muscle, isn't firing the way it should be. If you squat down and you lean excessively forward in order to get to depth, I can tell that your hip flexors are very tight and you're lacking strength in your glutes. If your lower back rounds significantly, that's also part of that. If your shoulders fall forward while squatting, it tells me that your pectorals and lats are probably pretty tight. So I start to look at these things, and whatever I find that's tight, there's always a correlating weak muscle. And the way we can look at this is if you look at your arm, your bicep and tricep, you're looking at your elbow. If you flex your bicep, what happens is the tricep on the other side of the joint has to relax in order to allow the bicep to contract. This is called reciprocal inhibition. If you always have chronically tight hips in the front, well, the opposing muscle is the glutes in the back. That is going to, over time, be constantly inhibited, and it's going to shut down and get weak. So then, with this analysis and these ideas in mind, my job is to figure out exactly what muscles on you are tight and overactive, and then figure out the muscles that are not firing properly, get them to be more active through like an isolation type of exercise where it's just that muscle isolated on its own. And then my final job is, now that we've got all the tight muscles loosened up and the weak muscles kind of awake and ready to go again, now reteach and reintegrate proper movement patterns so that, let's say you squat down and your knees shoot out way in front of you and you're quadricep dominant, which is destroying your knees. Well, I'm gonna calm those quadriceps down. I'm gonna try to roll and stretch the hip flexors and the quadricep muscles. I'm going to do an exercise that works on just the glutes by itself. Then I'm going to teach you how to squat using the glutes, where your hips travel back, your shins remain almost perpendicular to the floor, and you're placing all the stress of that squat on your hips rather than your knees. So now we start to change your movements altogether. And it's that 4-step process that I use to address and heal anything. Now, when I say heal, I'm not healing it. I'm setting your body up in the right position, and it can heal itself. It's one of the most magnificent things that we have, is this body can heal itself. You just got to give it the right conditions. That's how I operate. I couldn't really speak to how a physio functions in comparison.
That's really interesting. Now, we're in a society that is stressed nearly all the time. I very rarely meet a client nowadays who isn't suffering from stress. And you talked about how the cortisol changes with the postural changes, and you talked about the power pose, which actually I get a lot of clients to do. They think it's very funny when I say, let's do power pose. And the whole family do power pose. I get them all power posing. But there's actually serious science behind power pose. Do you want to just talk about that? Because actually, you know, if you have got too much cortisol in your body, you're going to have too much inflammation. It's going to have that inflammatory reaction, isn't it? And therefore, you're more likely to have arthritis because of that. Do you want to just talk about all that mechanism for me?
Absolutely. So I can definitely, in my opinion, once again, I can't back this except for my observations, that stress actually is probably the foundation of all these other problems, and the chronic inflammatory effects in the human body that lead to other disease states. You know, they're finding that it's chronic inflammation that's actually the cause of disease state, not the the effect of the disease state. So when it comes to power posings, citing Amy Cuddy, they took these participants and they had them sit in like these hunched over, slouched, kind of like sad crossed arm positions versus somebody with their chest puffed out or standing very confidently like they were the head of a company leading a business meeting or something like that. And after 2 minutes, they swabbed their saliva and checked for two key hormones, which would be cortisol, one of the body's primary stress hormones, and the fight or flight response, versus testosterone levels. And while testosterone sounds like a man thing, it's important for women as well in the right balance. So to speak to cortisol, they saw when power posing in just 2 minutes, cortisol levels dropped approximately 30%. So it's just an automatic reduction in stress. And another interesting and correlating study, or not, I shouldn't say study, informational bit that I learned recently from Dr. Kelly Starrett is, when you sit with poor posture, you collapse that ability to breathe out of the diaphragm, or that belly breathing process that like singers or instrument players would use. And you start to breathe out of the upper lobe of the lung. Well, when you breathe in this channel or in this area of the lung, you initiate more of a fight or flight response, because you're going to get those more rapid-paced, more shallow breaths that the body associates with an accelerated heart rate and whatnot. So by breathing that way, you actually increase the heart rate, you increase the body's adrenaline release and cortisol release, and we start doing this chronically, and it ruins sleep patterns. It makes us more nervous and anxious, all these things. So posture, I mean, it doesn't just affect these hormones because of the position itself. I mean, that is one key thing. The positioning of the body does affect these hormones, but it also affects your breathing. It affects, it can affect, LDL cholesterol can be elevated from sitting in poor posture for long periods. I can't cite exactly the study on that, but it's pretty amazing. And to be honest with you, this whole everybody's stressed thing, it's been really a key of my current research, and I'm very intrigued with a philosophical mode of thinking called Stoicism that I've kind of run across recently, where for me it was an immediate stress fix by first realizing that stress was just made up in my mind. There was no bear trying to kill me. There was no necessity for my body to be pumping out these chemicals. It was just my inability to keep my mind under control during various situations. Bad news would come, and all of a sudden a cascade of bad feelings would go through my body, rather than what Stoicism taught me was there are situations that either progress or move you forward in what you're trying to achieve, or if it's what you would normally call bad, it's actually an opportunity to hone your skills, to sharpen your axe, so to speak, and get better. So there is no such thing as bad anymore. There is no such thing to create these. It's either what you're trying to accomplish moves forward, or you have an opportunity to learn from the situation, to grow, to better yourself, so that when good circumstances externally do happen, you can take the most advantage of them. For me,
I believe that dose matters. So, in effect, in regards to stress like food, some doses are fantastic and will work really well for you, and you'll get a real buzz off it. And others, well, it's all too much for you. And so that's what I see. And stress is no different. The dose can make you or break you. And I think posture is completely underrated, like sleep.
You're 100% right.
Yeah, I really do see that, and I think that people do not understand the actual long-term effects of having poor posture, even with children. And we have them sat in the chair all day in schools now, and less physical activity than ever. We also have higher levels and increasing levels of obesity. We have sugar in foods that actually are destroying the bone structure, and drinks as well. Most people, I don't know about you, but I see are chronically dehydrated. There's such a number of factors here, and mostly people may do one or two things, and most people are going on a diet, but actually very few people are really truly considering some of these other things that would cost very little to resolve, and by, for instance, standing more, getting their posture right, and getting their sleep right.
If everyone did just those things, they would see such a reduction in disease state or instance of disease state. It would be incredible. Over in the United States, there's all this talk of healthcare and providing healthcare and moving towards this universal system of healthcare. And I never paid too much attention, because I just thought to myself, free healthcare, if that's what you want, is available right here, right now, for you, by just taking a little care of yourself. Yeah. You can significantly, knock on wood, I haven't been to a physician in many years. I haven't needed to, because I've learned the basics of how to take care of this body, it can heal itself. I mean, it's an amazing mechanism. You just have to give it a little something. You just can't abuse it every single day and expect that it's going to work right. So just that alone, if you did those things you just mentioned, you'll see a huge difference in how you feel on a daily basis. It's just it's amazing, but at the same time kind of mind-boggling that this isn't just the standard realization for everybody. And actually, you made me think of something when you were saying, we really don't realize the importance of posture. I find it very interesting that that postures in Eastern mysticism are the key to unlocking the ability to do wonderful things within yourself and change your consciousness and all these things. That's the Eastern mystic way using yoga. What is yoga? It's just different postures that unlock certain capabilities within yourself. So there's whether or not that is actually the case. I can't sit here and prove that definitively. But what I can say is there's definitely a whole school of thought and recognition that posture is extremely important to the well-being of a human. So, and just that alone, there's a lot of people who have discovered this.
Can you just tell us quickly about your Make in India initiative before you leave?
Because totally forgot about that.
I know you didn't tell me about that at the beginning, and
okay.
I would like to know a bit more about it before you leave today.
Absolutely. I'll give you the abridged version. So essentially, I am working with a small medical team, one of them being a physician here out of the United States that was just extremely frustrated that wound care solutions that were available were too expensive for most of his patients. They were not covered by insurances. They were very difficult to use and required sterile technique, using swabs, gloves, things like that. And overall, just that all created this lack of adherence or non-compliance rate. The United States, actually, the statistics for like a bed sore, pressure ulcer, doing proper care, about 58% of people don't use their dressings as prescribed because these things are really getting just more and more complicated. So he developed a really wonderful solution, and in our lab studies, it actually shows to be 8 times more effective than the current standard. The current standard for antimicrobial is silver dressings. Like in a petri dish, they can kill everything. They can kill viruses. They can kill bacteria. Problem is when they enter the human wound fluid, there are certain compounds, namely glutathione and cysteine, that bind to silver at a 1-to-1 ratio and shut it down, so it can't kill bacteria. So we have found a way. Well, I can't say we. I do the business side of things. I have found an individual who has found a way to put in another compound that is natural to the human body and actually has an anti-inflammatory effect, which also has a higher binding affinity to those compounds I was speaking of, and lets silver be free to work within the wound and kill all bacteria far more effectively than even the most expensive dressings on the market currently. And his dream, his vision, is to not make this the most expensive, but to make it the least expensive dressing available on the market so that all people can have access to high-quality medicine. And this has piqued the interest of the Indian government, and we are now moving forward with there's a project called Make in India where they're trying to bring manufacturers and other innovative companies to their country through different incentives to be the home base for manufacturing. But they want to take a chance on the fact that they have 1.25 billion people and over 45 million per year experience these chronic wounds. So they need help, and it seems like a logical place to start with the vision that the doctor has.
You're incredibly inspiring, Brendan, I have to say. I wish you truly continued success in your careers that you've got going and the many projects. And I imagine that's going to, with your ADD, I can imagine that's going to keep going. Can you tell people about how they get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So in the next, hopefully 10 to 14 days, we will have our informational website. Obviously I've pitched here our Posture PT, which you can find at confidentposture.com. But if you just want to learn a little bit more about these subjects that I spoke about today, we'll have a podcast, free information, and even some downloadable books with videos available at preventativepodcast.com. While you're there, there'll be an opportunity to reach out to me directly, and hopefully we can include in the show notes. For right now, if you need to get a hold of me in the next 10 days, I'll be more than happy to share my email address for any questions. And other podcasts that I've been on, people have already reached out with their individual questions, and we jump on Skype and I watch them do their movements and help them right online. So that's a possibility as well. But I'll share my email with your wonderful host, and she can put it up in the show notes, and we'll if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. This is a Preventative Podcast is all about helping people. We're not trying to sell you anything, and we want to make sure that people have access to this information that everybody needs to know and should know. Frankly.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much for joining me on Food for Thought. It
was a ton of fun. I really appreciate it. I look forward to continuing to talk to you and share ideas and everything. And hopefully when the show gets launched, I can bring you on and get your perspective of everything as far as nutrition and the world of preventative health.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.